what you want to do when you scrape is, so this part here has been, it's all smooth. Maybe you can't see that, but this is smooth, and right here, this from the corner to about here is still got the popcorn on it. And the important thing is you don't want there to be painted over popcorn. Okay, the usually plaster with some little particulates in it. It's just sprayed on, and it's usually very matte, very rough finish. If it's been painted, it usually has some other different finish, some probably more glossy, hopefully, if they didn't paint over it with some a matte coat. Otherwise it comes off really easy. Okay, so if it's painted, that's a different ball game. But if it's unpainted, it's really easy with just a spray bottle with some water in it, just a little bit warm, and you really want a good even spray. You don't want it squirting like a stream of water. You want a nice even disbursement of the water molecules, just real fine spray. Okay, because you want an even coat on the ceiling. So what we're going to do is we're just going to apply a nice even mist of water, and we just want to evenly cover. And that plaster is very hydrophilic, meaning it loves water and wants to soak up that water. Plaster is normally very hard and chalky. And so what you're doing with the water is you're letting that water soak up into the plaster to make it more gooey, or like a clay, like a soft clay. And then scraping it is much easier, and it comes off very, very easy once the plaster has absorbed some of that water. So the first coating you want to go around just in a section of maybe 3 foot by 3 foot, and go over everything very evenly, trying to apply as even a coat of water as you can. Think about like how you mow your lawn. You want just a nice even pattern all the way, because you don't want that. You want that water. So, and the other thing about plaster is it soaks it up right away. So that first coat that I've put in, or I've sprayed, it's already dry, because that plaster has literally wicked up that water into the plaster. So you want to go over it one more time, make sure it's a real even coat. Now alternate the direction that you're going to go. About like that. Okay, and then just give it a minute. Give it like maybe 1 or 2 minutes for that water to kind of soak up into there. The plaster is going to absorb all that water, and it's going to kind of pull it in, and it's going to make that change it from more chalky, hard, crusty to kind of almost a smeary, kind of like a soft clay. It'll still be hard, but it's going to be a lot easier to scrape off. And so what I usually do is I take just a very shallow type of tray. In this case, this is like a platter from a catering service that we used. But it's shallow and it's very lightweight, because you're going to be holding it and then scraping so that the pieces fall down into the tray. And if you do it right, we've given it about a minute. If I look up here, none of it is wet. I've sprayed everything here. Now here, my paint on my wall here, since I'm repainting, doesn't make that big of a deal. But if you want to, you can take an old rag and just kind of wipe up any extra moisture from the corner trim in the molding, so that you don't have any water just sitting there. But now this is, if I take my fingernail and just kind of scrape it, it kind of comes off underneath my fingernail real soft. It's not very hard anymore. And the important thing about scraping is their angle and consistent angle and consistent pressure. Okay, the force that you apply. So you want to scrape and maintain a nice consistent angle. So about 45 degrees is perfect. And you want to have consistent pressure so that you're not too much on the right corner or the left corner, but even. So it takes a little bit of practice. And then as you're moving your arm, you want their pressure to be consistent, and it's just a nice friction that you're going to feel as you push across. And as I move, I'm moving my tray, and I'm catching all, like 95%, 99% of my stuff I'm catching in my tray, and it comes off in nice long sheets. Okay, now it does take some effort, and your shoulders are going to tell you about it tomorrow, because pressing up on a ceiling is tough work. Now sometimes getting into it, I want to try to get a nice long sheet here, so I'm going to kind of press. See, now you can see that one's hanging just like that. That's a nice even peel, just like that. It should be relatively moist, or kind of just a little bit wet. I mean, it shouldn't be dripping wet, but it should be somewhat moist. Nice firm pressure, same angle, all the way across, and you'll feel it. I mean, if you're too shallow, you're gonna skid across the popcorn. You're not gonna get any. If you're too vertical, you're gonna jam. Okay. Now the problem is, if you're too dry, if there's not enough water up here, your putty knife or your scraper will skid. Okay, because it's too hard. You haven't absorbed enough water. Okay, that's one problem on one side. You need it to be wet. I mean, you need it to get wet enough. On the other side, you don't want it to be too wet, because if it's too wet, then you'll end up getting water into the paper board or the drywall or whatever the material is, and that the water will make this as so wet that you'll end up gouging the paper or the cardboard or whatever the material is with your knife, and you'll leave a little bit of a gouge mark. Okay, so it's kind of a little balance between not wet, not too wet, not too dry, and typically 2 good coatings of a nice even spray is sufficient. And you'll know if you come up to a place that didn't get enough water, it'll be kind of dry, and you'll skid a little bit, and you'll leave a little mark on the ceiling. But here, this is going nice and even sheets, and it should just come down. This is beautiful. No, you can't see it, but that is just as smooth as you really want it. There's a couple spots here where I'll just come back over and make sure it's as smooth as I can get it, but that's really it. Make sure you move the tray with your scrape. Give your shoulders a rest, because you're not going to be able to do it a long period of time. And then just work again about 3 foot by 3 foot. Get that all scraped up. You'll find that as you go up to the edge of where you've not sprayed any water, it'll get really crusty and really chalky, and your putty knife will begin to skid, or your scraping knife will begin to skid across, and then you know that you're up to the border of where you've sprayed. So then you have to get down and restart the whole process again. Just spray, let it set, and then scrape. And in the meantime, you can empty out. Now this is what your material will look like. Kind of a moist scrapings. They're just a little bit damp, but they soak up the water pretty well.